I am Jeff Foxworthy, and welcome to Gamekeeper Podcast. If you want to learn more about farming for wildlife and habitat management, then, buddy, you are in the right place. Join the Gamekeeper crew direct from Mossy Oak Land Enhancement Studio as they discuss the latest wildlife and habitat management practices, news, and, of course, hunting. There's no telling what you'll learn, but I'm going to tell you, I bet it's interesting. Enjoy.
3, 2, 1.
All right, everybody, here we are.
Yeah.
Took a lot to get this one ready to go. Goodness gracious. Turkey season's going on. Everybody's scattered like a covey of quail.
Yeah.
Won't return texts.
Swarming like some. Have you seen Richie? Where's Richie?
Richie's missing in action.
Richie, if you hear us, let us know you're live, please.
Dudley went to the Taylor Swift concert. Nobody's heard from him in 3 days.
He's probably joined the band or the groupies.
There's no telling. So I look around the room. I'm glad to see Mac. You look a little tired, though, Mac. Mac 3.5, I might add.
I am a little tired.
It happens this time of year.
Yeah.
You look really tired.
I'm frazzled.
Why are you tired?
Why are you
frazzled.
tired?
Yeah. Well, just turkey season, and they're not cooperating. And
That makes it worse, doesn't it? You're not as tired when they cooperate.
no, you can live through it, push through it, forget it, play through it, so to speak.
Yeah.
But not right at the moment, though. And so you heard we have a young lady sitting in here in Dudley's chair.
do.
It's my daughter, Jessie Cole.
In the house.
Yeah, first time. So I hope you don't say anything that embarrasses me today.
Well, I might try to do that on purpose, honestly.
I hope I do.
Yeah, well, you always do. You always do. So, well, today we're going to talk. It's a really interesting phenomenon.
No doubt about
It's going to
it.
happen soon. The cicadas are emerging.
Yep. A couple of them, aren't they?
Yeah, well, that's what we're going to find out. So we've got, of course, Mississippi State's got an expert.
Absolutely.
Go
Dogs.
So we reach out and we find Dr. Blake Layton, who is an entomologist at Mississippi State. And you know what? He doesn't have his headphones on.
I was sitting here wondering if I needed them or not, but I assume not. So, okay.
Yeah, so I'll start that introduction.
I think it's funny if we just.
I think about right.
All right.
Set that on there.
Yeah. Okay.
Here it is.
All right. So now we got him where he can hear us. He was looking at us like.
What are they saying?
I get a lot of those kind of looks
Yeah, you do.
from time
Sure
to time,
you do.
but I don't need our guests to look at us like that. So Dr. Layton, Blake, if I may, we're glad
Absolutely.
to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
I'm glad to be here, enjoying it.
Talking about bugs.
And you came highly recommended. A lot of people said this guy knows more about cicadas than anybody else in the state.
Well, insects in general have always been a hobby of mine. I just think of them as miniature wildlife. So I
That's
like to
right.
hunt, and I like to hunt insects too.
Oh, that's cool. I think they're like little aliens when you look at them.
They absolutely look
And it's like, look at that. There's a little bitty mini alien. There they are. Reminds me of home.
So that's a cicada sound right there. So if you're in the South and the Midwest is where let's back up. There are 2 broods that are gonna coincide their hatch this year. I guess their emergence.
They're emergence. Yeah.
Can you tell us what's going to happen? What's the significance?
Okay, so this is a little unusual event. There are 13-year periodical cicadas, which we have in the South, 17-year periodical cicadas, which occur farther north. And this year, in this particular situation, we're going to have an emergence of the 13-year brood and the 17-year brood at the same time in certain states. And if you do the math, all you got to do is multiply 13 by 17. You say, hey, that's only going to happen every 221 years. So that's why it's a little unusual. It's really not a big deal except in Illinois. So that's the one state where they're going to have the 13-year ones in the South and the 17-year ones in the north of the state. But for much of the country, we're only going to see one or the other.
Oh, okay.
So what states are you mostly going to see these 2 broods emerge in?
Well, the 13-year brood is going to occur here in Mississippi, where we are, and in 15 other southern states. So pretty much all of the southern states. That 17-year brood is going to occur in Illinois and just a few other contiguous states up around northern Illinois. So that's where we're going to see periodical cicadas this year.
Are they 2 different? I don't think they're 2 different species, but is there any physiological or, I guess, difference in them?
Yeah, well, actually, they are different species. They're
Okay.
considered, and it's even more twisted than that because with the 13-year brood, there are actually 4 different species.
Oh, wow.
Come out at the same time. They look very similar. The cicadas can tell the difference. The males and the females know the difference. But and with the 17-year brood, there are 3 different species.
Interesting. So the one it seems like the one that doesn't come as often is smaller and red. Is that?
That's the one we're looking for this year, the periodical cicadas. So
Okay.
they're easy to identify because they're black-bodied with red eyes. You can't miss them. And then they tend to have orange-colored wing margins, whereas the cicadas that we have every year, the so-called annual cicadas, well, they're more of a green color. And we've got quite a few species of those across the eastern U.S. as well, but they show up every year.
Okay. Well, I hate to jump in front of anybody, but what have these things been doing for the last 13 years?
You know, they're still there. You know, yeah. We make it sound like, hey, they just showed up out of nowhere, but they've been here the whole 13 or 17 years. They're just feeding on tree roots down in the ground, sucking the sap from those tree roots.
Really?
As immatures. And so now this is their big time. You know, this is the adults get to come out and party for about a month. Is how that works
Are
out.
they in a larvae state when they're feeding on the root?
It's like a larva. We call it a nymph because they have a gradual life cycle. But yeah, it's the immature stage.
Gotcha.
How do they know
They set an
13
alarm
years
clock,
is how do they know it's time?
That's a bit of a mystery. And there are some that, like with the 13-year one at where I live, a few came out last year. There are some that come out early, but the thing about these periodical cicadas is if they come out early, they usually don't survive to reproduce. So that keeps forcing them back to when you're going to have that big brood emergence.
So it may be selection over time.
It absolutely is. And the ecologists call it predator satiation, meaning there's more cicadas than all the predators can eat, so some of them reproduce.
Some of them make it.
Many of these things, when they crawl out, they're old enough to drive.
Oh, golly, I didn't even think about that.
I hadn't thought about that either. I'll just tell you that one.
Well, let me tell
Bobby
you how I
offers
did
these
that math.
mind-blowing things. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, that's just amazing that they're there that long.
So help us understand what, I mean, I guess the life cycle of a 13 or 17-year-old cicada.
So the way they work, we're about to see them emerge. We'll hear them singing up in the trees. That's the males singing. They'll attract females. They'll mate. And then those females, the way they lay their eggs, they find a pencil-sized twig on a tree, and they have these sharp ovipositors, and they insert their eggs in there. That'll actually cause some of those twigs to break, and they'll be hanging in brown later
That
this
was
year.
an oval posture?
Ovipositor.
Ovipositor.
Egg-laying device.
I got you. That
And
makes
it's
sense.
sharp, evidently.
Yeah.
And so they can do that, and then those eggs hatch in about 4, 5, 6 weeks. They fall to the ground, and those little nymphs, immatures, they dig in the ground and find them a tree root, and then they're tunneling in the ground for the next 13 or 17 years.
So is that thing like the size of a pinhead, or I mean?
When they first emerge, they're very tiny. Yeah, they're smaller. You can see them with your naked eye, but they're pretty small.
And they hit the ground and go to digging.
That's right. Yeah.
Do the birds get after them when they're in that stage?
The birds, they usually escape notice by birds then, and it's only when they're emerging like this emergence we're about to see. And a lot of people are familiar with, they see with annual cicadas too, you see their shed skins. When they emerge, they crawl up on the trunk of a tree, split their skin. They're still the immature stage then, and they split that skin, and the adult crawls out and leaves that empty shed skin hanging there on the tree. So I know we've all played with those as kids, whether it was 13-year or annual cicadas.
Yeah, you see those all the time. And
The big green ones.
what is that called? Is that their exoskeleton that they shed, or what is that?
That's exactly what it is, Bobby. Their exoskeleton, yeah, sure is. Because insects are different than us. We've got internal bones. Their skeleton is on the outside like a knight in a suit of armor.
Armor plated, and that's right.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Well, if he crawls up that tree, so he's looking for something vertical when he or she comes out of the ground,
Exactly. They're hardwired to look for that and go up. They sure are.
and they're just crawling up. That for something that size, it could be a pretty high crawl.
It can be, yeah. And you know, there's a lot of them. So in some of these habitats, there can be more than 1 million of these per acre. So if you're in some woods, let's say maybe a late season turkey hunt in some places, you may see all these little holes about a ½ inch in diameter in the ground, and there may be 15, 20, even more per square foot.
Wow.
So then you start doing the math, and yeah, I can see how that's up near 1 million per acre in this wooded area.
Wow.
I bet if that coincides with turkey season, I bet the turkeys love it.
I bet they eat them up.
Everything eats them up, yeah. So I'm sure turkeys definitely get their fair share of them. Yes.
I know we've talked about it before, about the cicadas and having a positive impact on nesting and everything else the year afterwards. Don't know if it's working or not.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
I don't know. I was hoping they tell me that you're also a hunter. So have you had any correlation to ever heard about a spring where these came out and you're seeing turkeys? We hear when armyworms are in fields. We all see a lot of turkeys out there catching armyworms. Just wondered if you had some maybe it's anecdotal, but something about.
Well, it's definitely a windfall for all kinds of wildlife that eats insects, and turkeys will definitely feast on these. I mean, they'll gorge themselves on them because they get 2 shots. So when they're emerging, they get a chance. Then now they emerge at night. So they want to duck as many predators as they can. They try to get up in the tree before it gets good daylight. So, but some of them still end up hanging around. And then at the end of their life, when they're dying, they end up falling back to the ground, a lot of them, and birds get a chance at them, and turkeys will get a chance at them. So it's just a huge feast for all kinds of wildlife. I'm not sure how big an impact it has on populations long term, just because it's such a short term event. It's like if somebody came in and said, we're going to feed you a great buffet every day for the next month. Well, we would enjoy it, but it might not change our lives that much. Again. Exactly. Yeah.
What about, I've always heard copperheads. You'll find copperheads at the base of some of these trees eating them.
Yeah, I can't say I've ever seen a snake eat one, but I would assume they would if, some fairly, because these can be fairly large. Some of them are up to about 1.5 inches in length. They vary a little in size depending on the whatever nutrition they had on those tree roots. Some tree roots are better than others, when they're down there in the soil feeding.
I was going to ask that. Is there a particular species of tree that they prefer?
That's a good question. Mostly think of hardwoods, not pines, but hardwoods of various kinds, and a lot, not just oaks, but various hardwoods.
And they're not harming the tree in any way.
They're not really, even though you got so many down there feeding on the roots. It seems like the trees are well adapted to that because that's an ongoing thing that they evolved to deal with. And even this, one of the things you'll see though at the end of this time, get out to the end of May, and later in more northern areas, is you'll see these hanging flagged twigs, we call them, where from that oviposition, that egg laying, they broke, and it'll be hanging down about 6 or 8 inches. And people, sometimes that can make the trees, the wood just look brown. It looks like, hey, this is terrible, but you come back next year and you say, hey, that really wasn't a big impact on the trees.
Life,
When they emerge and they're coming up, does that kind of, the holes in the ground, does that allow some aeration of the soil and water to get down into the tree roots better? Does it have any kind of positive impact on
Yeah, it certainly would, as well as they're tunneling through the ground down there. They're creating all sorts of galleries during those other 13 or 17 years when they're digging around in the soil also.
So they're moving around in the soil that whole 13 years or 17 years.
They are.
I kind of just imagine them hanging on tight to one
I took
tree
one
root.
bite and held on for 13 years.
No, they do move around, yeah. And if you're in the woods at the right time, you may see, just before they emerge, you may see some little like chimneys that pop up that look a little like a crawfish mound, a miniature. They're preparing to emerge.
Cleaning the tunnel out.
Getting ready, yeah. And one of the clues they use, another thing I used to wonder is, how do they know when to all come out? Because they almost do it on about the same 2 or 3 nights, but it's mostly related to soil temperature. If that soil temperature is around 65 degrees at the depth they are, which is usually 6 to 8 inches, then they say, hey, it's time to go, guys.
Yeah.
They got one of them down there that's blowing the whistle. So that's just so fascinating. But as an entomologist, do y'all go and dig down and find them and see and study them, or are y'all just guessing this is what's going on?
No, that's not something I've done personally. But yeah, there are entomologists that have devoted their career just to studying these or much of their career to the periodical cicadas. And so, yes, that has been done in great detail to sample them in various ways.
How far back have we kept records on these 13s and 17s?
So that's a good question. You can find good records back to just after the Civil War. And of course, people knew it was going on before that.
Right.
Now, another name for these, as a kid, I heard them called locusts.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Me too. That's
And-
what I first knew them as.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, we know locusts are really a grasshopper-like
Right,
critter.
right.
But if you think about the early settlers that came here from Europe, and all of a sudden everything's quiet, and then suddenly the woods are full with these 1 million+ insects per acre. Hey, these are hordes of locusts. So that's where that name came from, even though technically they're not a true locust.
So how do they make that noise?
They have some special structures on their abdomen. The males do. We call them thimbles that they resonate air over, like a little drum head.
Oh, yeah.
One on each side of their abdomen.
Interesting.
And that's the males.
That's the males.
Yeah.
And I said there were 4 species in 13-year brood, but the females can distinguish from the sounds of the males, and they're subtly different. But that's how they maintain that species integrity, because they know, hey, this is a male in my species.
By the sound they make.
Right. Yes. Wow. And other clues, other behavioral clues.
So when you read about this, they talk about just how loud it is in one of these major areas where all of them are coming out. That it's as loud as, I think I heard it referred to as an ambulance or a rock band.
Ambulance sirens or yeah.
Yeah. Have you experienced that?
I definitely have. Yeah, they'll emerge at my house this year, and so it was 13 years ago. It got pretty loud around there, and so you hear stories about people having to cancel weddings or rearrange weddings, and yeah, that may be a good thing to do if you were planning an outdoor wedding and other events that have to be canceled or rearranged or that just don't come off so well. So it's hard to carry on a conversation in the woods where these things are occurring.
I do. You do.
What'd you say? So do you get excited when you hear all that noise? I mean, as an entomologist, is that?
I do enjoy hearing it, because, this is, we're here in North America. As a kid, I would hear about African wildlife. I would think, man, I want to go to Africa and sell this wildlife they have. And then it's dawned on me, we got some pretty neat things here. A turkey gobbler strutting, a white-tailed deer, a wood duck, a periodical cicada. I mean, these are marvels that we have right here.
No doubt about that.
And this only occurs here in the eastern U.S. They occur about as far west as the east side of Texas and Oklahoma and Kansas, just right in the very eastern edge of those states, and then on to the east. So they're not out west.
So I would imagine that the wildlife that's eating these, I mean, it's just pure protein. They're getting so much of it that, I mean, that's their strategy is there's so many of them that they can't eat them all, and some of them are going to be able to reproduce. So what kind of impact do you think that has on nesting, on, that protein? You think that would help with the turkey, the poult shell? And do you think that would help, grow bigger fish? I mean, what kind of impact do you think it really has on the wildlife short term?
I think it would have a big short-term impact,
right?
Like for that turkey hen that's getting to eat all that extra protein. Well, she's going to do better raising those poults. And those poults may even have hatched early enough to take advantage of it in some parts of the country. Probably won't be old enough to be feeding a lot on insects, big insects, but fish. I've known entomologists that had flies.
Yeah.
And they said, I've got a fly that only works every 13 or every 17 years. But when it works really well, because they had cicada flies.
Yeah, I've tried some of those cicada flies. I'm looking forward to the hatch this year, in Tennessee. The trick is, I've heard, is there's just so many of them. You got to get them interested in yours.
Okay.
And you got to be able to see which one yours is.
Yeah, okay.
How late into the summer does the cicada emergence go?
Yeah, so I can speak for here in Mississippi where I am. We expect to see these emerge in the last week or last 10 days of April. Now, if it's cold, that may be delayed. And then through May, we'll see these periodical cicadas. So as you move farther north, that gets kicked a little farther later in the year. And then once the periodical cicadas wane, then that's when we'll start seeing the annual cicadas show up just like they do every year. So those periodical cicadas probably won't be around. You get to here you get to the second week of June and we won't have any more.
So are the annual cicadas just a bit more strategic? You see less of them, they come out later. Are they a bit more camouflaged? How are they avoiding predation as much?
Yeah, it's all of those things. Yeah, and so we do have, as I mentioned earlier, there's probably a couple of dozen species of annual cicadas here in Mississippi and throughout the U.S. Quite a few more than that. So they occur every year, but it may take them several years to complete a generation. It's just that there are some that are doing it every year that are emerging. So they're on a little different schedule than these periodical cicadas.
And they're bigger too, quite a bit bigger than the periodicals. Is that right?
Many of the species are. Many of the ones that we most commonly see are just a little bit bigger than the periodical cicadas.
I bet a bass would love one if it hit the water and was flitting around on there, kind of like they would do. I bet a bass would eat that up.
I've never had a chance to try them. I probably will try this year, but I know entomologists that have gotten out when these things are emerging at night, when they're still, at first when they molt, they're white, like a soft-shell crab. They say that's the time to get them, and you stir fry those, and they claim they're wonderful.
No way.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, ingredient wild.
We went
Wow.
from bass to. So you've
culinary.
actually eaten?
No, I have not eaten them. I want to try this year, but I got out too late in the morning, and by then they were already up in the trees the last time around when I was going to try it. So I got to get out in the woods. Yeah,
Lenny, have you?
I hadn't, but I mean, I'll try it. I mean,
Not-
you
yeah,
can cook
I'm
them
not-
in some butter.
I'll
They
eat it.
gotta be good.
ranch dressing?
So you want them when they're soft, not crunchy with
just
their
like a
exoskeleton.
soft-shell crab.
That
Yes.
is funny.
Yeah.
And they only emerge at night.
That's right. Yes.
That's why I've never seen one emerging.
See these people? When the clock strikes 5, it's not the end. It's just the beginning. They have to do these things. They have to do those things. Enter the all-new LS Tractor MT2 and MT2E, a relentless force of innovation. Redesigned with a new hood and cab built for comfort and visibility, with enhanced lifting capacity to get the job done. Making these people the ones everyone else calls those people. Visit your local LS Tractor dealer today.
Moultrie has pioneered the game management category. Today, Moultrie is one of the best-selling brands of feeders and seeders in the world, and they continue to innovate with new technology that gamekeepers will rely on. Moultrie products are always field-tested and designed for hunters by hunters, combining forward-thinking innovation with time-tested practicality. Moultrie, first in feeders since 1979. All right, so guys, Moultrie is offering our listeners a 15% site-wide discount at MoultrieFeeders.com. Use code Mossy Oak with a capital M, Mossy Oak, at MoultrieFeeders.com and get that 15% discount. Goodness gracious, 17 years, 13 years, and then mixed in with that, we have annual ones every year.
Right. Yes.
Mac, Wilkes ought to just love the whole idea that these things are going to be popping out of the ground.
I know it's really cool, and what's crazy is before this podcast I was looking at, so I mean there's thousands of different cicada species, right? I mean there's
Worldwide, there are, yes.
So why hasn't more, or why don't more breed in the 13-year to 17-year? Like why hadn't that been an adaptive trait of the other, thousands of cicadas?
Well, I think this is just a unique niche that these 13 and 17-year ones kind of fell into. And it's not really understood how this happened. The best theory I've heard of is that maybe it had something to do with when the glaciers melted in different parts of the country. And so they could, because they live in the soil, well, you can't do that if it's covered with glaciers and it's too cold for you to reproduce. So
Maybe.
we don't really know. There's a lot of theories out there, but we don't know why they ended up doing that. It does appear that maybe the 13-year ones came from the 17-year ones. With a 17-year brood, there are sometimes some of those that will emerge 4 years early. I said at my house last year, I saw some emerge 1 year early. Well, you can see how if they're emerging 4 years early, then over time you might get a split.
13, yeah.
And down south where you have a longer growing season, but that's not really known either.
Interesting.
Are there any, or do you believe that there's any medicinal purposes for the cicadas? Because I know that Native Americans used to think that there was.
I have never heard of any verified medicinal purposes, but yeah, I do know that the Native Americans definitely took advantage of them as a windfall food item. Yeah, they definitely ate them.
Cicada pie. So these things emerge. They break out of their shell. They throw their wings out. They secure that one breeding opportunity in 13 years. They deposit their eggs in a twig. Then what happens?
Then they're going to die.
They die.
Fall back to the ground, and maybe a turkey or a blue jay is going to eat them.
So the annual cicadas, do they die every year?
That's going on also.
So if you were to pick, you'd probably want to be a 17-year cicada, I guess.
Maybe so, yeah. One of the things you think of, the annual cicadas have various other predators and parasites, small ones, that feed on them and keep their numbers down. Well, if you think about it, if you go to a 13 or 17-year life cycle, it's hard for another critter to match its life cycle. So these don't have nearly as many predators and parasites on the small scale like other insects and things like that feed on.
Are there people that travel around and watch these broods, or entomologists, or just insect people in general, that y'all have some kind of like forum and you talk, we're going to North Georgia
There is a lot of that. There's a group in Connecticut that follows cicadas closely, and there's another website that you can find called Cicada Mania, and they've got all the information you can imagine about cicadas, both the annual cicadas and the periodical cicadas. It's kind of like the repository for information on cicadas in the U.S. So you can learn a lot about these things there.
That's where I did a lot of my research. Cicada mania.
What does cicada mean? Is it a Latin word meaning something? Or did it come from Latin?
It probably is, Bobby, but I don't know what that would be. So,
yeah. It's just an unusual word.
Yeah, you're right.
So is a 17-year-old bug is a really long-lived bug. Is that the oldest species of insects?
That's a good question. There are not many more that are longer than that. Some of the wood-boring beetles have longer life cycles.
Like termites.
Right. Well, not so much termites, but some of the beetles that live in wood. And they're a lot of those, it depends on the nutrition of the wood they're born in. So they may emerge in 13 years, or some of them may emerge in 20 or 30 years. So, there's a range there. There's a few that are longer than the 17 years, not many.
I wonder if there's, so like with tree rings, you can count back and you can age things. I wonder if there's a way, like you're counting back 13, 17 years to, see how well a season did back in I read that the Jamestown, one of the guy who was writing a journal in Jamestown, they had an emergence of cicadas, and he talked about it in his thing and how great of a year it was. It'd be really interesting to kind of go back 13 years, track that back, and see if it has any kind of, accordance with how good the year was.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that would be interesting, because one thing that's happened with these broods of 13 and 17-year ones is that they tend to be shrinking over time. I mentioned earlier that some broods have gone extinct. Maybe they weren't that numerous to start with, but if you think about it, if you're dependent on living in stands of hardwood trees, mature hardwood trees, whenever those get logged off, that population of cicadas in that particular area is not going to be there again. So, you do see that, and that's been kind of interesting to me. As a kid, I grew up on a farm in South Mississippi, and I wanted to be an entomologist, so I would hear about these things. I wanted to see them. I never got to see them at the farm. Since then, I found out that they were emerging just like 8 miles to the northeast of me, but I never knew that. So there's a place where this distribution stops and they don't occur anymore.
So if a patch of woods does get cleared that had a bunch of cicadas down in there, when they emerge, do they just kind of emerge like normal and they're like, where do we go? Or what happens there?
Well, the ones that, if it was cleared while there were nymphs in the ground feeding on those tree roots, they would die because those trees would die. So they would be without food. So, it would end for that area, that production of cicadas would end on that area as soon as those woods were cleared.
I hadn't thought about all that.
I didn't either. Yeah. I didn't know they
It's interesting.
fed on tree roots.
Now, though they can move back into areas. So you see there's sometimes big populations in urban areas that have a lot of older hardwood trees. So you can see big numbers in some of those older urban settings.
So they will fly off to other trees and lay their eggs in different trees, not necessarily stay in the same area?
They will, yeah. They don't have a long flight range, but they, quite a few hundred yards, even, maybe a half mile or so.
So how did you and your fellow entomologists come up with naming all these different broods?
There was a guy back in the early 1900s named Marlette, and he was studying these cicadas, and he just said, we got to have a better way to do this. And so he said, why don't we start with this brood here? He just arbitrarily picked one. He said, we're going to call this brood 1, and we're going to use Roman numerals. And then with 17-year ones, there ended up being 17 broods. At that time, there were. And with 13-year ones, then he just picked up with, hey, this is brood 18, this is brood 19, and so on. And as I said, since then, some of those broods have gone extinct. So now we have in the U.S. or in the world, there are 12 broods of 17-year cicadas and only 3 broods of 13-year cicadas left.
Huh. Wow. It's fascinating that he could know where all these different broods were. There had to be a lot of people cooperating and explaining and telling and looking out for them and advising them that, hey, we got some over here in North Georgia doing this, and these in Kentucky are doing that.
They have really detailed maps, and that amazes me too, because you keep in mind they were doing this with pen and paper and really slow mail. They couldn't just email each other and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing, or call each other. So you're exactly right. That was some amazing work that they were doing back then.
So,
go ahead. No,
you said there's 3 broods of 13-year cicadas?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So is that, help me understand that. What's the difference in the broods?
It just depends on the year they're coming out. So let's take this location here.
Okay.
I'm in Mississippi. So here in Mississippi, it just happens we're the only state where all 3 broods occur.
Okay.
So in Mississippi this year, we're going to see these brood 19 on the eastern side of the state. Mm-hmm. And then in, I think it's 2024, we're going to see another brood. It's just down in the southwest corner. It's the smallest brood. It'll occur just in southwest Mississippi and a little over into Louisiana. Hmm. And then the next year, we'll see a big brood that occurs in over half the counties in Mississippi, as well as many contiguous states.
But all those are 13 years.
They're all 13 years. They're just on a different schedule for emerging.
Gotcha. Interesting.
It really is.
No, it is.
So it sounds like there's just a ton of positive, it's helping the wildlife, it's helping the soil, it's helping the trees. So are there any negatives to this huge emergence of cicadas that we're about to see?
They really have very few negatives. The one that you see sometimes is, remember I talked about this egg laying into these twigs that causes these twigs to break. And so if you've got an orchard of peaches, maybe even pecans or something like that, and you get a lot of that damage, as the grower, you're kind of distressed about that. And that could adversely affect your crop either this year or maybe a subsequent year. That's relatively minor in the big scheme of things, but that's the type of damage they could cause. Can damage ornamental trees a little bit like that too, but it's really pretty minor.
Bringing it back to turkey hunting, I wonder if in some states like Illinois, where they're going to get both of them, I wonder if it's going to be so loud when they're trying to turkey hunt. Yeah,
I hadn't quite figured out what the timing is going to be between this and turkey season, but I turkey hunt, and I'd hate to be trying to hear a gobbler in the woods when these things were thrumming really loud. I think it would be really challenging.
Lenny, I had to tell you, hunting with you, you've got your phone in your pocket. You're constantly checking Onyx.
Yep. Very valuable key features all in those things. It really is. From the compass mode to recent imagery, I mean, it really helps you understand where you are spatially, where you're headed, where a turkey is, where he was. It's a heck of a tool to use in the spring woods.
I didn't realize that they're updating these maps every couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'd have never known about that clear cut that you were hunting if I didn't have that recent imagery.
Well, and you could share some waypoints with me.
I could share some points with you. with you. You're exactly right.
I mean, it has that
It
capability.
does have that sharing capability, which is great. You know, you're wanting to show me where your goblin turkeys are.
Oh, man. You know, Onyx, it's a great app.
It's a great app.
So guys can go to onyxmaps.com/hunt and use code Mossy Oak to get 20% off.
There you go.
I'm a big fan of Onyx.
I am too.
Well, I can think of a negative. I mean, let's just say you're a father and you've spent $100,000 on a wedding.
$100,000.
And all of a sudden there's a bunch of cicadas that show up. That'd be a
Yeah,
pretty...
wasted $100,000. Yeah.
Lord.
Well, I tell you, this is pretty fascinating how nature works. And I guess I was hoping that the poults might be able to take more advantage of this in certain areas, wherever it was happening. But it sounds like the timing may not be right for them.
Well, maybe for the eggshells to be stronger and
It
maybe
definitely could help there.
better hatch. Maybe, you might see a better, in 2 years.
It could help, yeah, because that hen or whoever's going to be feeding on these cicadas, they're going to have extra nutrition, maybe stronger bones even for the future too. So
Reserves.
My question about the timing and how long it would be going was, you talking about the over-satiation, or like there's just so many available so the predators can't get them all. Could that be helpful to poults because there's other food options in that kind of magic 14 days before they can start to
good
roost?
point.
That's a really good point. I'm sure that happens because, you think about something like a raccoon that would otherwise be looking for turkey eggs, and now, hey, I don't have to do that.
I don't really have to do a lot of searching.
Right.
Yeah.
Cicadas.
That's a great point.
Way to go, Rob.
Look at
Yeah,
Rob.
Rob.
What about like
Audio sensory specialist.
Yeah, Mr. Blake, that is our audio sensory specialist.
All right. Well,
So we've got, when you think about, we think about wildlife, but what about our pets? Mike, what about, I hear about dogs eating these things until they just get sick.
I've heard that too, that dogs love them. Yeah. So, I've not heard of any adverse effects on the dogs unless they did eat, just like maybe us eating
Just got a bellyache or something.
overindulging on something.
I can tell you right now, June's going to eat 10 million of them in my yard.
Yeah.
She already likes worms.
And I guess cats probably would too. Laney's got a bunch of cats.
Cats
We
can't
call them the
resist them,
crazy
yeah.
Big cat guy.
I'm a cat
Big
guy. all of a
crazy
sudden.
cat guy.
Get 2 cats and you're a cat guy.
Oh, man.
I think the squirrels would probably have the best run of the cicadas.
Oh, I thought, yeah.
You think they eat them? Squirrels would eat cicadas.
I don't know. I would assume.
I mean,
not?
anything that's hungry out there is going to eat them.
Well, we've got an expert here.
I'm not an expert on squirrels, though. I know they do eat insects, though, so I bet they would eat
Well,
them.
if they eat insects, they might.
Yeah.
That's a big old insect, though.
So if I went out to like a hardwood tree, if I went out to an oak and dug about 8 inches down, would I be able to find some little cicadas burrowing around down there?
You probably could find them right now if you did a little digging around a hardwood tree in a stand of upland hardwoods. Now you think about also they're not going to be in a hardwood swamp where that soil floods periodically because they're not going to be able to survive that. So, but upland hardwoods or mixed pine hardwoods, that's where you're going to find these things.
What would they
makes
look
sense.
like? Do they have little legs moving around down in there? Or they're just little larva-looking things.
So if you've seen these shed skins that are hanging on the side of a tree, I
Right.
know you have.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
exactly
absolutely.
what the nymphs look like. And so when you think about the digging in the soil, if you look at the front legs, you can see how well adapted they are for digging through the soil, and that's why they, kind of like a mole digs through the soil. They're called fossorial digging legs.
That's cool.
Nature, we say this a lot, just how fascinating it is, how complex it actually is.
Yeah.
And I rarely think about what's going on underneath the soil. I do in a food plot. We try to get the pH right and all the nutrients there, but I'm really not thinking about what's going on in the soil in the woods. And it's very complex.
I mean, it's a crazy thing. Every 17 years, you have these like little zombie cicadas coming out of the earth all at once. It's a pretty crazy phenomenon.
And it's not an area I've studied much, is the biology in the soil, but the guys that do, I mean, they tell me it's a zoo down there. There's all sorts of things living there, and it makes sense.
Do you have an area of expertise in entomology?
Well, I'm what's called an extension entomologist, and so I'm more of a generalist. I work with all sorts of insects that
That's cool.
influence people or as miniature wildlife.
And what made you want to become an entomologist? I heard you talking about that as a kid. You knew you already wanted to be one.
You know, all kids like insects.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that one of the reasons is they got good eyes and they're down there with them.
Right.
And I think I just never outgrew it. So
That's
I,
awesome.
I still collect bugs.
Yeah.
Do you really?
They're
Yeah,
cool.
I got
They're
a jar
cool.
in my freezer.
Do you? Oh, that's speaking of freezing. I heard that fishermen, you can freeze some of these cicadas, and then next year when there's not as many of them, the fish are not gorging on them. You can throw them out there and catch a few.
okay, that's a good tip. Yeah.
Trot line, Lanny.
What's
Yeah.
your favorite bug?
Yeah.
You know, that's a good question, and I get asked that a lot, and I've never been able to answer that. I enjoy all of them. Some are the next one. It's interesting.
So ticks and
that's the way that
mosquitoes,
works.
you're good with. You like the ticks and mosquitoes.
Those aren't bugs.
I have to begrudgingly admit they can be interesting, but yeah,
Yeah, is a tick a bug? Isn't it an arachnid? Is that a bug? I guess it would be.
they're closely related. So
Yeah.
they're more closely related to spiders, but yeah, they're in that same broader group for sure. Yeah.
I'm just glad we don't have those tarantula spiders around here. I don't think I could.
Like Australia or something.
Yeah, I don't think I could sit down against a tree and one of those crawl across my leg.
Have you ever seen the snappy lightning bugs in kind of South Mississippi? They do it here too.
I have seen those. In fact, just a couple of years ago, I went to a place intentionally up at Waudoxie.
Yeah, I
to
wanna
see
go this
those.
year to see it,
Quite
yeah.
impressive. It really is.
They do it at the Smoky Mountains too every year.
And
Yeah.
what is it?
They sync up their light.
Yeah,
The
it's
lightning
this
bugs.
amazing phenomenon where they do it all at the exact same time.
Sounds like one of Dudley's concerts or something.
It
I mean,
does, absolutely.
I've heard people talk about it on the Tom Bigby, but I've never seen it.
Jess Rayleigh has
Yeah,
seen it
he
before.
said he's seen it
Yeah.
right there in my
Oh, we
home.
can't believe anything. she says.
I've seen it out there.
Have you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they're synchronized.
I've seen it. Yeah,
I've seen a lot of lightning bugs out there.
I saw a lightning bug last night.
Now that is
That's
an interesting
early.
bug.
They are.
I mean, I can get on board with saying that's an interesting bug.
It's just it's one of many. But yeah, how do they make that light? I mean, scientists have studied it enough to know how they do it. But I mean, it's a cool light. It's not so hot it burns their ear off.
That's
So
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
You call it a lightning bug or a firefly?
I use both interchangeably,
Do you?
yeah.
Do
And to entomologists, the term bug is often used for a particular group, but then again, we're kind of loose with that. So
What about June bug?
June bug, that's technically a beetle, but yeah, I say June bug.
Do you?
You ever played with a June bug on a string?
I have not.
Oh, you got to try that this year.
All right.
You
Well, my
tie the
dog's
string to
named
the
June
middle
bug.
leg.
And just keep him on a leash?
Yeah, well, he's going to fly around then.
around.
Yeah.
Have you done that?
It is a
You look
lot of
familiar.
fun. Yeah.
She had a sheltered childhood, evidently.
Can't believe you didn't let her play with June bugs.
Yeah.
And what's your dog's name?
My dog's name is June bug.
There
I
you
got
go.
a particular interest in June bugs.
Okay.
I'm going to have to
Okay.
do that.
Have you ever heard the phrase, he jumped on that like a duck on a June bug?
No, I've never heard
Well,
that.
like, you can see if a June bug comes out and the duck eats him, well, the same thing's going to be going on with these cicadas, with
Right.
all these different animals jumping on them.
Yeah, no.
How about that? Well, what are we not asking you about cicadas? We probably should have.
You know, we may have covered most of the important things. I can't.
What about their big red eyes? That's like a pretty unique characteristic to them, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's a good point because usually in nature, when you see red and black, red and orange, black, what does that mean to you?
Probably what?
Danger.
Venomous?
Danger. Don't mess with that.
Yeah.
But these things are harmless. You can handle them, and we mentioned they're soft. They're sharp ovipositor that they can split a pencil-sized twig, but they don't pierce human skin with it.
Is that only the females that have that?
Only the females have that, right? And I have had them bite me just a little. It's like a little tiny pinprick. It gets your attention, but then it's no lasting effect. It's not like a sting. So they're really harmless.
And how do the females go about laying their eggs?
So they crawl up to that twig and they have that serrated ovipositor and they just work that into the bark.
Is
and
it all
split-
in one spot?
It's all, yes, they'll insert it there and they'll insert eggs in that one slit that they make in the bark, and then they'll crawl a little farther up.
Okay.
And they'll make another slit, and then they'll fly to another twig.
Gotcha.
And one female may lay several hundred eggs.
Wow. Is there a way to tell the difference between the males and females physiologically?
Yes, as she just mentioned, the females will have that ovipositor on the end of their abdomen, and the
Okay,
males
so
will
you gotta
not.
look for
Yeah,
that.
Yeah, and the males will have those thimbles, we call them, with which they make the sound.
Okay.
So these males up in the tree are making the sounds, and that it's and they're trying to attract a mate with all that.
Right,
That's all that
Like
is.
a goblin turkey.
Except the woods are full of them. Exactly. Very good analogy. Yeah.
It all comes back to the turkey.
So
They sound kind of desperate up there in the trees. The way they're.
whoever sings the loudest, I guess. Yeah. So
Is that how it works? They're doing their best to attract them.
that is how it works. Yes.
How long could it take to attract a female? Just if you're an average cicada up there and you're doing your thing, is it a couple of days or a couple of hours or weeks?
It's usually they do a lot once they get going in the morning or mid morning. So you think it's going to happen in a 2 or 3 hour period usually. So for them to do all their advertising and sort things out and to mate.
And in my mind's eye, it seems like the hotter the day gets, the more of that activity I hear. Is that just?
That's a very good point because if you think about it, insects are cold-blooded, so that means their rate of metabolism and activity, the warmer it is, the faster they move up to a point. Once it gets too hot, they don't. But yeah, that temperature definitely influences their rate of movement, their sound, things of that nature.
Lanny, I've got this figured out. We can get Mac in on this, and we could invent a lure that looks like a cicada. And then we could, every 13, 17 years.
Well, no, we won't because they're everywhere.
I just think a fish should
Guaranteed
go
to
crazy.
produce one fish every 17 years.
That's a pretty good guarantee.
Yeah,
We could
lucrative,
probably live
yeah.
up with that.
I would put one on the end of a hook. I bet you'd catch some big fish.
I bet you could.
I think we ought to try it.
I think we should.
I think we should. Hey, the way turkey season is going, we might as well be fishing.
Shit for real. Well, so look, I feel like there's probably something else we needed to ask you. So in the meantime, while we're trying to think of that, we're going to let Mac add. We've got a trivia question. We have a sponsor, Sheffield Financial, that sponsors our trivia question, and we've got a listener is going to win is automatically won a prize because we drew their name. But you're playing for a T-shirt.
Okay.
A podcast.
Gamekeeper podcast T-shirt. That's
Yeah,
right.
and they're available online, guys. If y'all go online to the Gamekeeper store,
Gamekeeper shop.
yep, you can see those and buy one. They make great gift items.
Today's trivia is brought to you by Sheffield Financial. Explore swift, effortless, and convenient financing for power sports, outdoor power equipment, and trailers, fueling your pursuits in hunting, fishing, and gamekeeping. More details at sheffieldfinancial.com.
I thought Richie was at work for a minute.
I wish Rob's doing a great job. I'm not saying that, but Richie this week has made me a little behind. Yeah. There's some stuff, yeah.
The old pan flute.
All right, man.
All right, let's reel it back in here. I did want to give one Blood on the Biologics shout out. Curtis Hoover sent us a picture of his niece Aubrey Wiles, and she was 6 years old and killed a big old longbeard in Lee County, South Carolina.
How about that?
So
That's awesome.
Pretty cool.
Well, I saw one. There's a kid from Montgomery, 9 years old, Jay Dozier, killed his first turkey.
Wow.
And it was as big as he was, with a big old fan. But he was so excited, killed with a 410, like so many of these kids are doing, and the being able to shoot these new fancy TSS shells that pattern so well. Apex.
Yeah, no, they do. I need to give a shout out to TSS, matter of fact, because we're going to have to go buy some more shells from what Hayden did the other weekend.
Yeah. How many times did he pull the
We
trigger?
won't talk about that. It was quite expensive, though.
Like $30 right there.
He's
Gone.
like, I just shot that last one at him. I'm like, dude, what are you doing?
Apex would probably make you a deal on
Yeah,
something.
that's right.
The Furminator is the industry's most versatile piece of food plot equipment, allowing plotters to do every step of the process, working the soil, adding seed and soil supplements, and compacting, from start to finish with a single implement. It's hassle-free by design. Set it for the seed size and simply drive the tractor and the Furminator does the rest. Check it out at thefurminator.com.
Hey guys, Dudley from Gamekeepers here. I want to tell you about the all-new Gunner Dog Bowl. It's designed for home and built for travel. It's customizable, leak-resistant, light on weight, solid on durability, and rust-proof. Like other Gunner products, they're made in Nashville and designed for everywhere.
Nosler's known for their bullets, and now they're making suppressors. Nosler suppressors are made for hunting. Adding a Nosler suppressor to your rifle will make you a quieter, more accurate, and more effective hunter. Protect your hearing and disturb less game with a Nosler suppressor. The time to hunt quiet is now. Learn more at nosler.com.
All right, so the prize today is a fan lock by Velvet Antler Technology.
Yeah,
A fan lock.
It's new technology. You can, so like if you killed, and I'm going to throw myself in, anybody kills a turkey this spring, instead of putting borax on that meat chunk and letting it dry out, you can spray this fan lock on there. Gets rid of all the bugs, and it preserves that fan. It's brand new. It's really cool. If you'll go to velvetantlertechnologies.com, you can check out all the stuff they have. They've got some stuff that you can spray on mounts and clean them up and keep bugs off of them. As an entomologist, I thought this kind of all made sense.
I'm paying attention
Yeah,
here.
that's cool.
Look at you.
Well, you don't want to get bugs on your mounts.
No.
Isn't that a carpet bug that gets in these? Sometimes gets in mounts.
Carpet beetles and clothes moths will definitely infest mounts if they're not properly cared for. Yeah.
So if you got, I mean, it's a disaster.
If you've got as many mounts as you do, you need some of that stuff. There's no doubt about it.
There's somebody put a deer mount in my office while I was gone just to store. I came in there. It looks like that thing has leprosy. It's got patches all over it where some bugs got into it.
Oof. Well, don't let them
It's
bring that
nasty
down
looking.
here. We've kept them out of this building, thank goodness. Knock on wood. Yeah. Anyway, okay, go ahead, Mike.
All right, so AA0621 is the prize winner of
the fan lock.
Of the fan lock, the Velvet Antler Technology. All right, so the trivia question is, Bobby gave me one and I ended up finding another one. So no one knows this one but me. All right, I don't know how much of a music fan you are, but I'm going to ask you a multiple choice question and you just have to pick one of the artists. Which artist wrote a song about cicadas? Hank Williams, Bob Dylan, or Leonard Skinner?
Wow.
That's a great
That is a great question.
It's
Hit
a tough
the
one.
horns. Would you please hit the horns?
That's a great question, Mac. Wrote a song about cicadas. Bob Dylan,
You know, there's
Leonard Skinner, or who?
and there's
Williams.
probably a lot of faculty at
Williams.
Mississippi State that's listening to this. I don't want to add any pressure to you, but they're probably listening going, oh,
And one of them probably knows the answer to that.
you got a 33% chance.
I'm gonna have to go with Hank Williams.
So it was Bob Dylan,
Really?
and the song was called "The Day of the Locust." So he misheard the cicadas
And thought it was
called them a locust, and so wrote a song about it, "The Day of the Locust."
Well, I got to tell you, my guess would have been Hank Williams Jr. too.
I was going to guess St. Louis, too.
100%.
Yeah,
if he
me
had
too.
said a song about locusts, would you have got that?
I don't think that would have helped me either.
So I've got a redemption for you. So we want to make sure you get this podcast T-shirt. So what is the longest living insect?
We're going to say today it's a 17-year cicada. There may be a few beetles that live longer, but 17-year cicada.
All right, ring the bell. Nailed
How
it.
about that? Well, Mike over here with the
I'm
tough.
telling you, he's showing you up with his
I'll
questions.
tell you what, yeah, I might turn that over to him. Let him handle that. Well, guys, this has been really interesting.
Very interesting.
Did anybody think of anything else to ask in the meantime? I feel like we've asked you a bunch of questions.
Yeah, he was in the hot seat there. We throwed it on him for a minute.
Well, it makes me want to go fishing with some. So I'm watching the weather. It feels like, we felt like an early spring, but now these nights have been a lot cooler. So that's going to delay some things, I suppose.
It could, yeah. It's the soil temperature, like I said, 6 to 8 inches deep. So the soil temperature 2 inches deep is already up around 63 or has been, but we'll just have to see what happens.
So I got one more question. So you're saying soil temperature. Does a rain or anything help trigger anything, or is it just that soil temperature?
A rain could, and especially if we'd had a dry spring, or we still have dry conditions, and then you get a rain, that will help trigger them too, that and the temperature. There's a few other things that'll influence them also.
Well,
we need to start looking for these things in in May?
End of April
End
here.
of
April,
Yeah.
end of April.
Yeah.
So about a month.
Yeah. I bet a lot of people are going to be Googling, what is that loud noise I'm hearing?
Well, I see on Cicada Mania, you can get your cicada T-shirt, your cicada
All
hat,
right.
your cicada coffee mug. Yeah, pretty cool.
If you're in an area where these things emerge, you're not going to miss them. You'll know when they come out.
I'm excited to fish this hatch or emergence. It's gonna be awesome.
How about that? All right, Mac, you got anything else? Good trivia question.
Thumbs up.
Laney, I appreciate
Props,
you
man.
being here. You look tired.
I don't look near as tired as you do.
We're all exhausted. I just want to hear one gobble somewhere.
Just one time.
Goodness gracious. What a
Yep,
spring.
yep.
Dr. Blake Layton.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed it. Appreciate the invitation.
Yeah,
sure
Dudley
did.
said we would enjoy you. He spoke very highly of you.
I guess he's somewhere in the wilderness of Mississippi, wondering what direction north is.
There's no telling what he's doing right now.
Well, y'all tell Dudley hello for me.
We definitely will.
Yeah, we will. Well, why don't you say goodbye, Jesse?
Goodbye, Jesse.
Get us out of here, Rob.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Gamekeeper Podcast. And be sure to tune in again. Subscribe to Gamekeeper Farming for Wildlife magazine, and don't miss the Mossy Oak Properties Fistful of Dirt podcast with my good buddy, Ronnie Cuz Strickland.